Cool. Thanks, everyone. For those of you who have been into EVs for less than 3 years, I'll give you a bit of a rundown. I gave a presentation at the AEVA National Conference in Devonport in November 2017, and it was, as you can see, trends in electric cars. And one thing that you notice governments and manufacturers tend to do is they kind of overestimate their time frames a bit. Things might change over the original announcement and when the car is finally released. So I thought it's a good time to do a bit of a retrospective and see what's changed. So this is it's a very lengthy slideshow, but you see all the ones that say 2017 at the top corner. That's just a copy of my last slide. And I've got some interspersed ones that show what's changed, what's different, that kind of thing. So moving on. Back in 2017, these were mostly the two choices you had. You could either get a car with a very small range or a very expensive one. And there were a few other options in between, but the most common ones were the Leaf and probably the Model S, I'd say, were the ones that you saw around the place most of the time. The other options were the i3 and the plug-in hybrid, lots of plug-in hybrids around, which were they were popular, but they weren't pure EVs. The i3 had a range extender. Plug-in hybrid was plug-in hybrid, obviously. So this was also just a picture from back then. That was what was available in the UK at the same time. So I tried to find one for the UK now, but I couldn't find one that had all 40 or 50 models in it. So I started with this was from 2017. I thought I'd talk about the unobtainable ones first, because they're the ones that everyone gets excited about, but you can never afford them. So these ones, I think, were only, I think the remake concept one in particular was one that was crashed by Jeremy Hammond from Top Gear, something like that. So since then, what have we got? The same two. The new Tesla Roadster was announced. We still, I think that was announced 2018 or not long after the original presentation, and it's still not available. And the Lotus Evita there, which I think its claim to fame is they're only making 200 of them or something like that. So if you want something really fast, well, spoiler, it's not one of these ones. There's a faster one later on. So ever since Tesla started becoming a household name, I guess, lots of other companies tried to do the whole startup thing, take on the big established companies. Now, these are two which were kind of best known at the time. Faraday Future, I don't think has really moved on from where they were now. I think their CEO's just resigned or something like that. Still in the future. So still in the future, that's right. They do have a few more different models on their website, but they're still just pictures. Lucid Air, however, they had a big announcement only about 3 weeks ago. They announced their car with a range of 800 kilometres, which was a record-breaking number up until about 12 hours ago when Tesla had their battery day. But it was nice that another company had this time in the limelight. So it's their charging rate over 300 kilowatts. So those fast chargers at Kingsmeadows and Campbelltown might actually be used to their full capacity. Of course, the price is starting at US $80,000. So yeah, it's still a bit much. Bollinger was their design for their electric use was very utilitarian. It was function over form. Since then, what have they done? Let's see. The retail price has been announced as 125,000 US. Their battery range and towing estimates, they're close, but they still haven't released a vehicle. They're working on the manufacturing. However, a bit of a picture of the inside, just how it has the full length, what do you call it? Full length storage area for long bits of timber or things like that.
6 metre length through there.
That's right, right through the entire.
And don't slam the brakes on too hard.
That's right.
You hold on to it.
That's it. But the one thing that they have done is they've put some more pictures up, so that's good. But if you compare those two, you see there is a bit of a minor design there with the vehicle as well. The entire back part is supposed to be, it is supposed to sort of come apart and convert from a full cab to just a tray. But I think they went with the 3 different models there.
Yes.
That's right. Now, Rivian's a company that we hadn't even heard, well, some people had heard of, but it wasn't a well-known name in 2017. They've kind of, they were established about, oh yeah, I did put it down. They established themselves about 11 years ago, and they kept really quiet until they actually had something to announce. So they've got the similar style to Bollinger, is that they have the Ute and the SUV. They're targeted at the adventure market. Their founder mentioned they're not going to install chargers everywhere, but they will focus on things like national parks and hiking trails and that kind of thing, the kind of places where people who like to get outdoors like to go. And unlike the other, I wouldn't call them fly-by-night companies, unlike the other lesser-known companies, their investment from Ford and Amazon has definitely helped get them to establish their manufacturing facilities. And this is some of the unique features that you can have when you don't have when you don't have all this ICE engine and bits and pieces teeing up things. This is right behind the back seat, basically passes all the way through the car on both sides. So for surfboards and skis and things like that. This little fold-out thing is designed to be a little seat to sit on. So you can take off your muddy boots and things. That's right.
Instead of the whole goes from front to back.
That's right, yeah.
Not around corners too fast.
That's right.
You can sleep in it.
And make sure they're locked. I think some people have tried to climb in there. Don't know if they slept in there. Yeah. This is an entire slide-out camp kitchen with utensil storage, cooking utensils. There's an induction hot plate there that runs off the car battery. Water storage, that kind of thing. Ooh, you might need to plug a Karcher into the power points in the tray, perhaps. I don't know for that one. And the frunk is big enough to hold a camp fridge. That's right. So we're still waiting to see them actually be released, but I think they're planning to start manufacturing next year. It is often next year.
Price range?
Oh, pretty high. I think they're, no, I didn't record it, but I think it's going to be at least 120,000. But they do have fairly high ranges, as you'd expect from the sort of outdoor vehicles. No, they're based in, where's the manufacturing? Illinois, I think. A lot of these companies are doing a very similar thing to Tesla with their battery gigafactory. I think Lucid is one that has theirs in the desert in Arizona, so Tesla's is in Nevada. So don't know why they go for the same area.
You can watch RIVIAN. They've done a TV series after Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor driving. That's right. Electric Harley Davidsons from.
That's right. Up to South America. That's right.
Long way out.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. And there is one more company that I haven't made a slide for, but I will mention them. Nikola Motors decided to compete with, try to compete with Tesla with their hydrogen semi, and they also sort of moved towards the hydrogen ute and then a hydrogen hybrid battery ute. And I think they were caught recently rolling their truck downhill in one of their videos, and a few other not so popular things. And a couple of days ago, their CEO resigned. So, he voluntarily left the companies so he could defend himself in the court of law himself. Anyway, I didn't put all that on the slide, but Yeah, but they also have a factory, or they have a sign saying the factory will be here.
GM invested quite a bit in them recently, and
That's
maybe
right.
really what they invested.
Yeah. So yeah, one to watch, or one to avoid maybe. So Sono Motors was a small German, it was a group of students originally, and their big idea was to put solar panels on the roof and the body of the car, because that's something that, whenever you read a EV article on social media, they say, why don't they just put solar on the roof and let it run forever? Well, that's right. That's right. Or at night
Everybody
time.
thinks it's a brand new idea that nobody's ever thought of.
I know. It isn't that bad. It isn't the worst idea. I think the worst would be why don't they put wind generators on the roof? but that's it.
Can I just mention a couple of things about Sino?
Yeah.
They're actually building the cars in Sweden, Trollhättan, in a factory that's going to be producing only renewable energy, and so they're contract manufacturing it. And because the solar panels are going to be covered with like a sort of a hard plastic resin sort of, they're not going to have a stamping factor. They don't need to put they don't need to stamp out sort of aluminium panels.
Yeah.
So at first it's a silly idea maybe, but it's not that silly. And in Germany they get in summer about 35 k's a day.
Yeah, I think
Extra,
that's what I
so
found, yeah.
even Hazard you could probably push to 50 on a sunny day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's more interesting if you look into it at first glance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it did start from a very small team.
It's a niche sort of product.
But fortunately, they did their crowdfunding back in 2017. They got 550,000 euros, and just January this year, 53 million euros to start their actual manufacturing.
Yeah,
So that's
the prototype out, I think, early to mid next year, and actual production early 22.
Yeah. So that's
There's actually not a very good reason to put the solar panels on. Like it is 30% efficient. The solar panel, 30% of the energy goes into your battery instead of heating your car.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Keep it cool as well. That's right. Yeah. So a few of the specs have changed, but they were pretty close. And I think the factory is a former Saab factory that they're building here. Yeah. Yeah. So now that they've got their capital, this 53 million, this came about through a community campaign. So that was it's like small scale investors and the reservation holders putting more of their deposit in. That came about because they originally had an agreement with a larger organisation, and they wanted Sono to go in a slightly different direction. So I would expect, break away from the uniqueness of the vehicle, I would say.
I might add that's one of the few cars, along with Lucid, that just announced that will have bi-directional charging. You can use it with the grid.
Like that.
Like that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, these were some of their images from 3 years ago.
Well, the kids charging the car.
How you can? Well, you don't know, do you? Could be a solar tent. Don't know. And that one there has the green stuff that looks like moss is actually moss. It's like it's an all natural climate control thing. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need to trim it or anything like that. No law maintenance. And one that unfortunately, it was a very interesting idea 3 years ago when Dyson came up with their idea when James Dyson came up with the idea to build an EV. They just bought a battery that had a few patents on certain types of batteries, and they're very well known for being able to sell expensive things to lots of people. So it's their thing.
The idea was sucked up into thin air.
But yeah, unfortunately, yeah, the idea sucked. Maybe. Yeah, they after spending a lot of money, they finally decided they're not going to do it, and then he told everyone about the car. So not quite sure. So those were all the new ones. well, not all the new ones. So most of the new companies that have started up to sort of compete. So the originals. I thought I'd leave this here. I didn't want to update it because I thought it'd be interesting to see which ones were completely wrong, because lots of manufacturers up here with their statements on when they're going to, you know, release certain types of vehicles and how many they're going to sell and how much they're going to invest in their manufacturing. And down here we have the various national bodies who have stated when they're going to ban ICE vehicles in certain areas. One that I noticed here, UK to ban petrol sales by 2040. They've just revised that to 2030 in the last couple of weeks. Quite a few of the quite a few others I think are going to do the same, or it's just going to naturally happen. The vehicle bans from nations, generally it's a message to the manufacturers to start building the cars, not really a message to the consumers, we're going to threaten you by taking away your ICE cars, although it tends to get interpreted that way sometimes. So Volvo, all new models electrified after 2019. Well, it's after 2019. Has anyone seen any Polestars driving around? No. So,
They've got batteries, 12-volt batteries.
oh well. Does that count as electrified? That's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, that was their Polestar 1, which was their plug-in hybrid at the time. Polestar 2, due in Australia late 2020, according to everything, according to everyone. But yeah, they get delayed. COVID obviously is a good, won't say excuse, but it's a valid reason for many things. Yeah, it's going to start at about, what have we got, 95,000 Australian. So it's expensive, but it was, I think Robert Llewellyn reviewed this one on Fully Charged, and he said it was it better than the Tesla or the best one apart from Tesla?
I think most.
Yeah. That's right. So we're still waiting to see those ones in Australia. Mercedes had an entire sub-brand developed for its EVs, the EQ platform. They were building their dedicated factories just for EVs. It's a common there was a common message across from many of the big manufacturers. So this is their range of EVs on their site. I left a bit of black space there so you can see how empty it was. So that's the EQC, which is their, I guess, compact EV. They still say they're going to offer 7 BEVs across all segments, and then that's also from the Australian site. So a lot of the time, these announcements generally might only occur in Europe or in the US. These are some of their press images from 3 years ago. This one looks a little bit different now. It's a little bit more realistic, I guess.
It doesn't glow.
No blue glows, nothing like that. But you can see the range of vehicles they're aiming for here. I think that one might be a smart car, I'm not sure. And you've got the vans and trucks as well, which Mercedes do. So another area to follow. Volkswagen said they'd have 300 EVs by 2030, and that sounds amazing. But then you realise Volkswagen is actually all these companies. The Volkswagen Group is all these companies. That's all right. They threw these images at us 3 years ago. The standard for most of these ones, by the way, is 350 to 400k. That's for most of these normally priced cars. So the ID hatchback and the ID Cross, which have since changed. The ID's become the ID3. Production has started, and they're delivering them in Europe right now, as you can see.
Even right-hand drive ones in the UK, I think, already as well.
Oh, yeah, there we go. That's it. So it looks a bit different to that one, but I think that's probably for the better. And the ID Cross became the ID4. Now, why they gave them these numbers, not quite sure. I think the 3 was because it was designed to be the 3rd big Volkswagen vehicle, I think, after the Beetle and the Golf.
Yeah.
So it's designed to be their next major generation for decades to come. And the ID4 Cross will be the one that they'll be bringing to Australia first. Doesn't necessarily mean soon, but first. And
what will it be costed at?
It's going to be a little bit more than the ID3, this one here. This one was I'm thinking of the European prices, because of course they've got a few more incentives and things like that, but that was designed to be more in the affordable range.
It looks a lot like a Golf.
Sorry?
It looks to me a lot like a Golf.
Well,
Yeah, it's designed to, I think, yeah. So
the new and familiar.
it's designed to be, mass market pricing. So the fact that we won't get it for another 2 years might be good, because battery prices might come down by
In
then.
Australian dollars, about 58 to 78,000, depending on the battery pack, which isn't
No.
real cheap for a mass-produced people's car that work.
Yeah, so they're probably waiting for that to come down as well. But the other one they announced was the ID Buzz, which everyone looks at it and makes that noise. It's like, I want one, but yeah, it's
That's what hippies want to become hipsters.
that's right. So that one's the actual design hasn't changed, but people have come up with some more renders. So I thought I'd make the pictures a bit more interesting by putting those variations in. I think these are fan. I think that's a fan image. That one was at one of their car shows. So you got a delivery van and your camper van styles there. But one thing to note is that 150 kilowatt CCS charging is between 100 and 150 is pretty close to the standard for most of these new ones. Yeah, I think NEDC, so a pinch of salt.
Very optimistic rate.
That's right. Yeah, and they are planning to come in multiple battery levels, so I'd say that would be the highest spec. Yeah, that's right. Porsche Mission E. Here we go. Now this is one of the few ones that actually has been launched in Australia. Launched, that's right. Unfortunately, it's not really one we're going to see a lot of around the streets, but that's okay.
One in Hobart.
Sorry?
There will be one in Hobart. Friend of mine's ordered.
I have heard that.
Oh,
Not a friend of yours, but there might be two. I don't know.
Yeah, you got more information.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, so it's a nice little 191,000 starting price there for the entry-level model. So they did revise their charging rate down from 350 to 270, but that's okay, because one thing I did laugh about a couple of years ago was these chargers. There are only two of them in the world, 350 kilowatts. Who's going to use them? One's in Atlanta and one's in Berlin. Well, that's ridiculous. Who's going to use those? Oh, wait, hang on. Here we go. We went from 2 in the world to 2 in Tasmania. And on this map, this is it's kind of a forward-looking map. So it's all the ones that exist and are in development and coming soon. But all the orange ones are 350 kilowatt. So there's a bit of a backbone through the main capitals there, and we're a bit lucky in Tassie. We got them ahead of most of those areas. But
lucky, a lot of hard work by certain people in the room.
that's right.
What's the bottom right photograph?
Bottom right. So those ones, the Kingston those ones. So here, I had Tesla included as one of the established players. 3 years ago, that might have been a bit of a gamble. They're still a bit of an upstart, but I think going by their sales volume, their financials, I think they're pretty well established now. Back then, they had a factory in California and a battery factory in Nevada. Now they've got one in Shanghai that's been upgraded, one in Berlin that's been built, one in Austin that's been built. I'm losing count. Yeah. So, and at the time, all we knew about Tesla's upcoming vehicles, well, there is one that's not on here, of course, but all we had were fan renders and vague silhouettes. We still don't have any of these 3 vehicles in Australia. Well, we don't have 2 of them anywhere, but at least we have real pictures of them now. So that's the Roadster, which I mentioned before about those unobtainable fast cars. Yeah, that would be the winner at the moment. When it gets released.
Y will be fantastic.
Yeah, the Model Y is going to be very, very popular, I think. Going by how well the Model 3 sold in Australia.
It's just got a bit more capacity, that's all.
Yeah.
Hatch.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's almost as much space in the Y than there's in the X, it's quite amazing, really.
Yeah.
Very little difference.
The Model Y it's supposed to be about $5,000 more than the equivalent Model 3, except I think they're holding off on the lowest range Model Y, so entry price is pretty high.
But if they do them in China then and send them here, then they might be cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd rather they were done in Germany.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion as to where they'll be made because all factories have their benefits. But I mean, we'd like a factory in Australia, but we don't really have the volume for it yet. So there was one vehicle missing from that. I'll talk about that one later. That's all right. These are like well, I think in Japan they're called key cars. Japan has a smaller registration, smaller costs for a smaller vehicle because they just want to make the most efficient use of space on their streets and in their car park. So they encourage small vehicles, whereas we have the same registration rate if you're driving a Nissan Patrol or a Mazda 2 kind of thing. But look at what actually happened. The Mini, we can actually buy in Australia now. Unfortunately, it's $60,000 and the range is about 200 kilometres. So if you want something at that price or at that range, I think there are better options. But I'm not a Mini salesperson, obviously. The Honda E there had a bit of a design change, not much. The cameras, the mirrors, which were cameras, still cameras. But that might just be a newer render. The actual real one might not be like that.
I understand that will have bi-directional charging as well.
Okay, agree. And the smart car, I don't think there's any plans for that for those in Australia, unfortunately. They have moved to a fully electric brand, so you can't get the petrol smart cars in Europe anymore. Okay, now we get to the ones which were a bit more common. This one's quite common, but not in Australia. They only ever made it in left-hand drive. So yeah, they didn't even have it in the UK. They only had it in the US and in Europe as the Ampera E. It was marketed as a Model 3 competitor, and it was doing quite well up until my presentation, and then the Model 3 kind of took off, and it went a bit quiet. They are coming up with a new version for the next couple of years, which I think will be slightly bigger or a bigger battery, something along those lines. But there's still no news about availability in Australia, unfortunately.
Subversion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a.
Yeah, but it's an iteration on that car and not hugely better car. That's the problem in trying to go up against the Model 3 or the Y.
Right. Okay. That's all right. The Ioniq, this was one that we thought 3 years ago, oh, this looks okay. It might be a popular vehicle. Who knows? Yeah, turned out it was coming to Australia in 2018, 2019, and it did. It's one of the few that did. So not only was it released, it was very popular. Quite a few of them parked outside. There's also been a newer version since then in the past 3 years. So
Just a place really.
oh, and the battery size as well. Yeah, the battery went from 28 to 38 kilowatt hours as well. So the range, real range, went from what, 230 to 300. Does that sound right? Something like that. And it's been.
The other doing something with Origin at the moment, offering to install a 7.4 kilowatt charger at your home for free, so long as you keep it there for at least 2 years and only run your car through that charger because they want to get some data from it.
No,
but you've got to join Origin Energy,
which is a challenge for us here.
Supply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't really do that.
It's hard to do it.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So Ioniq is, I think a couple of months ago, Hyundai announced Ioniq would become a whole new vehicle sub-brand for them, and they'll be making multiple vehicles based on the Ioniq brand, going by the success of the original one. So there's not much at the moment. You can see a few different concept car style designs there, which means they're generally looking a bit crazier than what they'll end up as. But there's going to be, SUV version, normal sedan, that kind of thing. So one to look for. But there was one surprise that Hyundai had for us, which we didn't see 3 years ago, and that was the Kona. This wasn't even on my original presentation because we had no idea that it was coming. When it was launched in Australia, it halved the entry price, half the entry barrier to a 300 kilometre EV. The only other option at the time was the Tesla Model S. So yeah, 65,000, range of a bit more than the Model 3 standard range, and it costs a bit less. So on a pure dollar per range measurement, that's probably one of the better ones in Australia, and it's quite popular. You agree? Yeah, there we go. Especially if you live, up the north of the state and you're driving to meetings in Hobart all the time. One of the other ones that we thought 3 years ago might have been really popular, didn't turn out to be as popular as we had hoped. There was a newer version with a larger battery, and I think it says 300 and something behind that. Yeah. There it is, 315 kilometre range. But it was never available in Australia. That newer one was also the first one to have DC fast charging. The other ones had the 22 kilowatt AC charging. So it wasn't promoted very well by Renault. It was mostly only available to businesses with AEVAs. Although now that they're pulling it from Australia, there might be specials on, do you think, Ray?
Yes. I'll take orders. I'll walk back home if someone would like to buy that. No, maybe one. It is 18,000 under the list price.
Yeah.
There is a story about which perhaps I'll share with you later.
Okay. But Renault, I believe, still does have their Kangoo vans as well. So that they still may be doing EV sales in Australia, but yeah, they've sort of slipped out of the limelight for the time being. And this is a Leaf, bright yellow there. I haven't seen a bright yellow one like that around. But yeah, we're all very keen on the availability of this in Australia because the old Leaf was one of the classics. They were very common. And yeah, the batteries are the same physical size, which does bode well for future replacements, I would say. So it was a bit later than we expected, about a year later. The Pro Pilot wasn't available in Australia. And there was a higher range version, but yeah, they didn't make that available, although they've just announced in the last couple of weeks again. This is one of the challenges with this presentation, was that I was always updating things at the last minute. But yeah, they will have a longer range model available in Australia next year.
They just seem so reluctant to actually sell you a car, don't they? Seriously.
There's a few people here who have bought from this.
Yeah, my range is 270. And broad charge, the other day is 263 on the clock.
Okay, it might be, yeah, range measurements can vary a lot depending on whether it's manufacturer's spec or what you actually get or how cold it is, if you're on a highway.
Have you heard of the Nissan Arias coming to Australia?
Spoilers. That's all right. I need a few more slides left. That's right. Model 3, of course, the big one that I didn't mention on the Tesla slide previously. It was going to be 55,000. Yeah, I know. There's a few sad faces in the room, including me there. But when it ended up being 70,000 for the base one.
And it's now up to
80. Yeah, yeah. So there's 7,000 reservations, and there have been about 5,000 delivered in the last year in Australia. So that's good. There's a small sample of the ones in Tassie there. There are a few, yeah, lots of. It was a very action-packed time on social media when they're all being revealed. Photos of cars lined up at the port at Devonport and so on.
How many are there in Tasmania now? Because you seem everywhere.
I think close to about. Sorry.
I think there's about 100.
120.
Is this Model 3s or?
Yeah, all Teslas.
Okay.
Altogether.
Yeah.
The one
Most of them would be free, though.
I know there's about 300 EVs total, I think, according to, does that sound right, John? Yeah. Yeah. No, of the ones that I've got on my little spotting list, yes, that's right. I've got 210 vehicles total on that, and 50 of them are Teslas. So I don't know the ratios work out. There might be lots of Teslas hiding away somewhere. They might not want to be seen.
I would, to the Chatswood Tesla store, that's what they told me.
Okay.
January, February, that's what they told me.
Oh. Salespeople, I don't know.
Well, they delivered ours on a truck.
Yeah.
He said, "Here you are." He backed it off and said, "Drive it." I said, "But how? I don't know how to do it."
Yeah.
It was awful.
I suppose that's the challenge that a lot of people in Tassie had, because on the mainland you're going to the shop, to the store, and they run you through it and everything like that. Whereas down here it's best guess.
They were really good, actually. They took us online, but
okay.
They said as soon as it's delivered, ring us up.
Yeah.
But we sat there.
It'd be a bit stressful if it's parked out there on the street and just want to get it in the driveway. And
especially
you're not
in a one-way area.
You're trying and you're trying to work out the gear shifter, which has reverse and everything on the.
We couldn't even find them.
That's right. I'm sure that in a few years, when you buy a Tesla, it'll just drive itself to your house. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So this was from 2017. This was the options for the next year. These were the 4 big cars that were going to be. These were going to be the bulk of sales. Or so I thought. But what actually happened was this. You had the Kona pop in here and surprise us all. The Zoe faded off in the background, and then suddenly the old Leaf had a resurgence due to the availability of second-hand imports.
Specialist enthusiast vehicle.
That's it. That's it. So that brought this number way down to 20,000, which was a really big benefit so far as the entry point to being able to afford an EV was. And going by how many of the Leaves I see driving around Hobart, especially with the good car stickers on them. So yeah, we had a range here that was at a lower price than we thought. Plus, we had the lower entry level price there as well. So that's it. So yeah. Oh, I've already said all that now. That's right. But yeah, people had imported their own Leafs. They'd imported the new model Leafs as well. There's a couple of those out there in the car park at the moment. And then you have the good car company doing the importing for people who are a bit uncertain about the process and aren't sure what they want to do. I mentioned that the 62 kilowatt hour Leaf was coming to Australia next year. That news came out about a week after a story on The Driven about someone who had imported their own 62 kilowatt hour Leaf. So they didn't want to wait, so they did that. I think the couple who live in Canberra, and I think the day after they got it, they drove to Wagga Wagga just to have a look because they could. Yeah, that kind of thing there, and yeah, so that kind of importing, I suppose, puts pressure on the manufacturers, shows that there is the demand there. Now, the next 3 years. In reality, I should have done a whole new presentation based on this, but I just did one slide, so don't worry. So there's a few here. This one, the MG, is actually available in Australia now-ish. Might be a month away. They've been saying now-ish for the last few months, but it's not far away. The last 24 hours, I saw there's another MG, which is more of a longer station wagon type design. I can't remember the name of it. I think it might have been Chaw 5. That's it, MG5. So that's the thing. There's new news all the time with EVs. It's hard to keep up there. The Cybertruck obviously wasn't on my predictions before. No, I don't think anyone could predict that.
Not even Elon.
That's right. Again, in the Battery Day presentation today, I think there was a point was made that there'd be a slightly smaller version for Europe and non-American markets. The big ones only.
Did it have the crumpling or something?
I think there was something to do with the safety design rules. yeah, they thought that it wouldn't pass elsewhere. But we have giant F-150s and F-350s in Australia, and they pass, so I don't know. Citroen EC4, don't know if that's actually going to make it to Australia, but it is mentioned on Citroen's Australian website, so that's it's a bit of a clue, but it's no guarantee. Nissan Aria as well. John asked about that before. That's going to be Nissan's first car with a liquid cooled battery, I believe. Yeah, towing. And it's going to be also going to be Nissan's first car with a CCS socket as well. So yeah, so a few changes there. One thing you notice with at least those three across the top is that the SUV format has been a lot. It's suddenly, you know, it's the new thing. A lot of the ones from the past 3 years were generally sedan shaped or maybe compact SUVs, CUVs. But those two plus the Model Y, I think it's a reflection of how the broader car market is in Australia, and that flows through to the EVs.
Charles, what's CCS?
Oh, CCS is the plug type. Pretty much every big vehicle except the Nissans and Mitsubishis use it at the moment, I think. And yeah, that's it. That's the next 3 years on one slide and the last 3 years on about 50 slides.